There's a sound in the atmosphere tonight. And if you can hear it, you were meant to be here. This is not a coincidence. You didn't stumble onto this message by accident. While millions scroll past in spiritual slumber, something ancient and eternal reached through the digital noise and pulled your spirit to this exact moment. They tried to silence this revelation. They hoped you'd never discover what I'm about to show you. For decades, the enemy has whispered the same lie into the ears of God's chosen ones. You'll never have enough. You'll always struggle. Wealth isn't for people like you. But what if everything they told you about prosperity was a carefully crafted deception? What if the very poverty that's haunted your bloodline, the financial struggle that's followed you like a shadow, the shame you've carried about money, what if it was never God's plan for your life? What if it was a spiritual assignment designed to keep you small, silent, and powerless? Tonight, that assignment expires. You see, there's something the kingdom of darkness desperately doesn't want you to know. There's a wealth transfer protocol written in heaven with your name on it, not because you've earned it, not because you've been perfect, but because you've been faithful in the wilderness. You've worshiped through the drought. You've tithed through the tears. And now, heaven is about to shock you with the method of your deliverance. Before we go any deeper, I want to thank every single one of you who has supported this message through Super Thanks. Your generosity means more than you know. You're not just donating, you're helping spread light to others who feel alone in their calling. Whether you give or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here, your support, your time, your attention. It all matters. And if this message resonates with your soul, if you feel that holy stirring, consider planting a seed of faith. Sometimes the very act of giving unlocks the very breakthrough you've been praying for. But here's what happened that made the darkness tremble. Last week, while in prayer, I was shown something that left me speechless. I saw a scroll being unrolled in the courts of heaven, and on that scroll were names, not millions of names, not thousands, but a remnant. The faithful few who've endured in silence, who've been overlooked by man but noticed by God. Your name was on that scroll. And what I'm about to reveal will shatter every lie you've believed about your financial destiny. Because the way God is about to make you rich will shock you to your core. Are you ready for a divine alarm that will wake your finances from the dead? Then stay with me. Because what happens next changes everything. They thought your empty pockets were evidence of God's silence. They were wrong. You remember those nights, don't you? When the bills stacked higher than your faith felt strong. When you opened that refrigerator to nothing but condiments and hope. When you smiled at the checkout counter while your card got declined, whispering, "Try it again," like a prayer, knowing full well there was nothing left to try. The shame wasn't just financial. It was spiritual. It crept into your bones like winter cold, making you question everything you thought you knew about God's love for you. You watched others prosper while you rationed. You saw favor fall on everyone except the one person who spent the most time on their knees. And they noticed. Oh, they noticed. The subtle glances when you wore the same outfit twice in 1 week. The way conversations shifted when talk turned to vacations you couldn't afford. The religious ones who whispered about your lack of faith as if poverty was a spiritual disease you caught from not praying hard enough. But here's what they couldn't see from their comfortable judgments. You weren't decreasing. You were being refined. Every unpaid bill was a test of trust. Every empty cupboard was a classroom of dependence. Every night you chose worship over worry. You made a deposit in heaven's economy that compounds differently than earthly interest. They saw debt. Heaven saw destiny. Your poverty was a prophecy waiting to mature. You see, while they were counting your zeros, God was counting your tears. While they measured your lack, heaven was measuring your loyalty. While they documented your defeats, the angels were documenting your devotion. You didn't know it then, but every time you tithed when it made no natural sense, you were making a sound in the spirit realm. Every time you gave when you had nothing to give, you triggered a release in dimensions you couldn't see. Every time you praised while your pockets were empty, you set something in motion that would eventually demand a response from the throne of grace. The mockery wasn't random. The criticism wasn't casual. The shame wasn't accidental. You were under spiritual surveillance, chosen one, not by the enemy alone, but by heaven itself. You see, God doesn't give abundance to the impressive. He gives it to the faithful. He doesn't bless the ones who already have enough. He multiplies in the hands of those who've learned to trust with nothing. Your years of want weren't punishment, they were preparation. You learned things in the valley that prosperity could never teach. You discovered faith that only grows in the soil of desperation. You developed a prayer life that only comes from having nowhere else to turn. You cultivated a worship that rises from the ashes of everything you thought you needed to be happy. And now those seeds are about to break ground. You remember the woman with the alabaster box? She broke it open and poured it all out. Every precious drop, while others criticized the waste. But heaven called it worship. Heaven called it wisdom. Heaven called it the fragrance that would fill eternity. Your sacrifice has been recorded. Your faithfulness has been filed. Your endurance has been entered into evidence. While they laughed at your lack, heaven was keeping meticulous records of your resilience. While they questioned your calling, God was qualifying you for something they couldn't comprehend. While they saw failure, the Father saw fruit ripening in secret seasons. You survived what should have broken you. You endured what would have destroyed others. You stayed faithful when unfaithfulness would have been easier. You kept believing when the evidence suggested you were believing in vain. That wasn't foolishness. That was faith in its purest form. And faith like that doesn't go unrewarded. Faith like that doesn't go unnoticed. Faith like that creates a debt in heaven that must be paid with interest. The same people who whispered about your struggle are about to witness your surge. The same voices that questioned your anointing are about to hear heaven's answer through your abundance. The same eyes that pitied your process are about to see the product of divine patience. Your wealth won't come from their system. It will come from His sovereignty. Your increase won't follow their formulas. It will follow His faithfulness. Your prosperity won't be explained by their logic. It will only be understood by His love. Every tear you cried in secret was collected in heaven's vials. Every prayer you whispered in desperation was heard in heaven's halls. Every seed you sowed in silence was planted in heaven's soil. And now it's harvest time. The laughter is about to turn to awe. The mockery is about to become marvel. The shame is about to shift to shock as they witness what happens when heaven honors the humble and exalts the enduring. You didn't just survive your storm, chosen one. You prepared for your season, and your season is now. They thought they were watching you fail. They were actually witnessing you being made ready. They thought poverty would teach you your place. It taught you your power. You remember those nights, don't you? When the darkness felt heavier than your blanket and your prayers felt like they were bouncing off a brass ceiling. When you stared at bills that laughed at your bank balance and shame whispered that maybe, just maybe, you weren't as chosen as you thought. But here's what the enemy never calculated. Fire doesn't destroy gold. It reveals it. You see, chosen one, what looked like financial hell was actually heaven's laboratory. Every sleepless night when you wondered how you'd make it through another month. Every moment you had to choose between pride and provision. Every time you smiled at your children while your heart was breaking over what you couldn't give them. You weren't just surviving. You were being baptized in something the wealthy will never understand. Holy equity. The kind of spiritual wealth that can't be taxed, stolen, or crashed by any earthly system. While others built their confidence on credit scores, you built yours on covenant. While they learned to trust portfolios, you learned to trust the provider. And that, beloved, is why your breakthrough won't look like anyone else's. You didn't just survive lack, you graduated from it. There's a spiritual law most people never discover. God doesn't give abundance to the abundant. He gives it to the refined. And refinement happens in the furnace. Not the boardroom, not the classroom. The furnace, where everything false burns away and only what's eternal remains. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? Those moments when you had to choose between bitter and better, when the voice of offense whispered, "Why them and not you?" But something deeper, something divinely stubborn in your spirit said, "Not today, devil, not today." You chose worship over worry, praise over panic, giving over gripping, and every time you made that choice, heaven took notes. Because the God who sees in secret was building your capacity in the invisible realm. Your character was expanding to match the calling you couldn't see yet. The furnace wasn't your punishment, it was your promotion exam. And oh, how the darkness miscalculated. They thought if they could keep you broke long enough, you'd break. If they could keep you stressed about money long enough, you'd stop believing in miracles. If they could make you feel forgotten long enough, you'd forget who you were. But you didn't fall. You rose. You didn't run. You stood. You didn't flinch. You smiled through tears that carried more power than their rage ever could. You see, there's something about a soul that's been pressed but not crushed, perplexed but not in despair, persecuted but not abandoned. You become dangerous to the kingdom of darkness, not because of what you have, but because of what you've survived, not because of your wealth, but because of your witness. You learned to find God in empty cupboards. You discovered His voice in the silence of unanswered prayers. You felt His presence when human help was nowhere to be found. And that, chosen one, is graduate-level faith that most believers never reach. While others were building their kingdoms on sand, you were being built into a kingdom that cannot be shaken. Every time you had to tell your children, "We can't afford that right now," but followed it with, "But God will provide," you were prophesying. Every time you walked past things you wanted but couldn't buy, yet still whispered thank you to heaven, you were worshiping in a dimension that prosperity preachers don't understand. You weren't just poor. You were being purified. The fire that was meant to consume your dreams was actually forging them into something indestructible. The pressure that was supposed to make you crack was actually creating a diamond. The wilderness that felt like exile was actually your private tutoring session with the Almighty. And now you carry something in your spirit that money can't buy and poverty can't steal. You carry the unshakable knowing that you are not defined by your circumstances. You are defined by your covenant. And that covenant, beloved, is about to manifest in ways that will make your former lack look like preparation for abundance. You survived the furnace of lack. You didn't just emerge with scars. You emerged with spiritual equity that's about to be converted into earthly authority. Because the same God who sustained you with nothing is about to overwhelm you with everything. And when it comes, and it's coming, you won't worship the wealth. You'll worship the one who withheld it until you were ready to wield it. The fire is over, chosen one. The refinement is complete. What rises from these ashes will shock the very system that tried to bury you. You are no longer learning to survive without enough. You are being prepared to steward more than enough. And the difference is everything. They thought the closed doors would teach you your place. They were wrong. Every rejection letter that found its way to your mailbox, every phone call that never came, every interview where you walked out knowing they'd already decided before you even spoke your first word. You felt it, didn't you? That hollow ache in your chest when they looked right through you like you were invisible. Like your decades of experience meant nothing. Like your faithfulness counted for zero. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't see, is that there's a courtroom in heaven. And in that courtroom, every no they spoke over your life was being documented as evidence, not against you, but against them. You see, while they were measuring you by their broken systems, God was writing a different verdict. While they were checking boxes you couldn't fill, heaven was stamping approved across your destiny in letters of fire. They rejected your application, but God had already accepted your assignment. There's something about divine justice that earth systems will never understand. They think favor flows through connections, through who you know, through how you look on paper. But heaven's economy operates on a frequency they can't detect. It's called faithfulness, and you, chosen one, have been broadcasting on that frequency for years. Every morning you got up and tried again, even when yesterday's rejection still stung. Every time you whispered, "God, I trust you," through tears they never saw. Every moment you chose grace over bitterness when they treated you like you were disposable. Heaven recorded it all, not as a divine accountant keeping score, but as a loving father building a case for your vindication. And then the gavel fell. Overruled, thunder echoed through celestial chambers. This one is mine. This one has been faithful in the wilderness. This one has worshiped through the silence. This one has my favor, and my favor needs no earthly permission. Do you know what happens when heaven's court system overrides earth's rejection? When the God who owns cattle on 1,000 hills decides to bypass every gatekeeper who told you not qualified? The same doors that were slammed in your face suddenly swing wide. The same voices that dismissed you now call you sir and ma'am with trembling respect. But this isn't about revenge. This is about revelation. God isn't lifting you up to humiliate them. He's elevating you to demonstrate something the world forgot. Favor isn't earned through manipulation. It's released through consecration. You remember that day, don't you? When they told you the position had been filled. When they said your experience wasn't quite the right fit. When they made you feel like you were asking for charity instead of offering excellence. You walked to your car in silence, sat in the parking lot, and wondered if God had forgotten your name. He hadn't. He was just waiting for the perfect moment to remind them, and you, who really makes the decisions. See, what they mistook for your weakness was actually your weapon, your quiet dignity, your refusal to compromise, your choice to trust God's timing instead of forcing doors open through manipulation. They thought your patience meant you were powerless. They had no idea you were connected to the ultimate power source. And now, as favor begins to flow like a river toward your life, watch how the same people who overlooked you suddenly develop spiritual cataracts. They'll strain their eyes trying to figure out how you went from invisible to unstoppable. They'll whisper in corners, "How did that happen? Where did they come from? What do they have that we don't have?" The answer is simple. You have heaven's endorsement, and heaven's endorsement doesn't expire, doesn't require renewal, and doesn't need earthly validation. But here's what will shock you about God's method of vindication. He doesn't just open one door. He opens floodgates. He doesn't just give you a job. He gives you influence. He doesn't just restore your income. He redistributes your impact. Because when God decides to showcase his favor, he doesn't whisper, he roars. Every no they gave you was actually God's way of protecting you from settling for less than his best. Every delay they caused was heaven buying time to prepare something bigger than you dared imagine. Every time they made you wait in that lobby, God was orchestrating a divine appointment that would make their opportunity look like pocket change. You didn't fight your way to the top. You were carried there by invisible hands. You didn't network your way into favor. Favor found your address and moved in permanently. You didn't convince anyone of your worth. Your worth convinced itself. And now, as you walk into rooms where you once begged for consideration, remember this. You're not there because you proved them wrong. You're there because God proved himself faithful. You're not walking in vindication. You're walking in verification of a promise that was made before the foundation of the world. The same voice that called light out of darkness just called your name out of obscurity. The same hand that parted the Red Sea just parted every obstacle between you and your destiny. The same God who made Pharaoh's heart recognize Moses' authority just made your rejectors recognize your anointing. Heaven's court is always in session, and the verdict over your life was never in question. They thought they were the judge, but they were just witnesses to a divine overruling that was already written in eternity. The denial never belonged to you, but the approval, that's been yours all along. They thought silence would starve your spirit. They thought if heaven stayed quiet long enough, you'd stop believing. They thought if the miracles delayed just a little longer, you'd join the ranks of the bitter and the broken. They were wrong. You see, chosen one, there's something the enemy never understood about your DNA. There's something written in the core of your being that hell simply cannot decode. You weren't built to quit when the lights went out. You were forged to shine brightest in the absolute darkness. And every moment you stayed faithful when faith felt foolish. Every time you whispered thank you with empty hands. Every night you chose worship over worry. You were making deposits into an account that exists beyond the reach of earthly banks. You were already becoming rich, and you didn't even know it. Listen carefully. Heaven doesn't operate on the world's payroll system. The world pays performers. Heaven funds the faithful. The world rewards the visible. Heaven enriches the invisible. And while others were climbing ladders for applause, you were descending into the secret place where real wealth is forged. You thought you were losing ground. You were gaining territory. You thought you were falling behind. You were being positioned ahead. You thought you were being forgotten. You were being prepared for remembrance. Every tear you cried in private became liquid gold in heaven's vault. Every prayer you whispered when your voice was too weak to speak aloud was recorded as a divine transaction. Every time you chose to bless instead of curse, to hope instead of despair, to stand instead of fall. You were accumulating riches that no stock market crash could touch, no recession could steal, no enemy could freeze. You've been wealthy this entire time. You just measured it by the wrong currency. The wealth began the moment you said yes to God when saying no would have been easier. It multiplied when you forgave the unforgivable. It compounded when you served without recognition. It matured when you praised with a broken heart. And it reached critical mass when you realized that your faithfulness in the dark was more valuable than any spotlight the world could offer. You thought you were preparing for a breakthrough. The breakthrough was your preparation. You thought you were waiting for your season. Your season was the waiting. You thought the test would end, so the blessing could begin. The test was the blessing in disguise. And now, chosen one, heaven is opening the books. The divine accountant is revealing your true balance. And what you're about to discover will redefine everything you thought you knew about wealth, worth, and the way God rewards his remnant. You weren't poor during those lean years. You were being purified. You weren't lacking during those silent seasons. You were being loaded with spiritual ammunition. You weren't overlooked during those lonely moments. You were being overseen by angels who were documenting every act of quiet courage. The widow's mite wasn't just a story you heard in Sunday school. It was a prophecy about your life. When you gave your last, when you tithed from your tears, when you sowed from your sorrow, heaven saw wealth where the world saw waste. Heaven recognized riches where others saw ruins. And that investment portfolio you built in the invisible realm, it's about to manifest in the visible one. But here's what the enemy never calculated. He thought poverty would make you desperate. It made you dependent on God. He thought struggle would make you bitter. It made you better. He thought isolation would make you weak. It made you a weapon forged in the furnace of divine favor. You didn't just survive the wilderness. You thrived in it. You didn't just endure the valley. You found treasure buried in its shadows. You didn't just weather the storm. You learned to dance in the rain that others complained about. And every step you took in faith while walking through that valley of financial shadows, every seed you planted in the soil of sacrifice, every offering you gave when logic screamed to hold tight, you were participating in a wealth-building program that operates outside the laws of this world. You were partnering with heaven in a divine investment strategy that guaranteed returns beyond your wildest dreams. The richness was always there, chosen one, hidden in your obedience, concealed in your consistency, wrapped in your willingness to worship when worship was all you had left to give. You thought you were broke. You were actually building an empire in the spirit realm. You thought you were empty-handed. Your hands were full of invisible treasures that were just waiting for the right moment to become visible. You thought you had nothing to show for your faithfulness. Heaven was preparing to show the world what faithfulness produces. And now, as the curtain is being pulled back and the veil is being lifted, you're about to see that every moment of your seeming poverty was actually a moment of profound prosperity in the making. You were rich the moment you chose trust over fear. You were wealthy the moment you picked praise over panic. You were loaded the moment you selected love over logic. And now that richness is about to clothe itself in forms you can touch, accounts you can access, and opportunities you can walk through. Heaven doesn't pay performers, chosen one. It funds the faithful. And you stayed when others fled. They built you a cage called Not Enough and convinced you it was your home. For decades, you lived behind bars made of lies, looking through windows at a world that seemed reserved for everyone else. But here's what they never told you. The cage was never locked. The prison was constructed with smoke and mirrors, and the very thing that held you captive was about to become the very thing that set you free. You see, poverty isn't what they taught you it was. It's not about the numbers in your bank account or the car in your driveway. Poverty is a spiritual deception, a carefully crafted illusion designed to convince God's children that they were born for breadcrumbs when they were destined for banquets. It's the lie that whispers you have to earn what heaven already sealed in your name before you took your first breath. But you grew up in that lie, didn't you? You were raised to believe that struggle was noble, that barely getting by was somehow holy, that wanting more made you greedy. They taught you to apologize for dreaming. They trained you to shrink when abundance walked into the room. They convinced you that poverty was a virtue when it was actually a prison sentence handed down by the enemy of your soul. Tonight, that sentence is being overturned. You didn't choose poverty. Poverty chose you. It stalked your bloodline like a generational hunter, tracking the scent of surrender from your great-grandparents down to your children. It whispered the same mantras in every ear. Work harder. Settle for less. Be grateful for scraps. Don't reach too high. Stay in your lane. And for years, you believed those whispers were wisdom. But something inside you never agreed. Something deep in your spirit kept saying, "This isn't right. This isn't how it's supposed to be." That something was the voice of your true identity calling from beyond the prison walls. That was God reminding you that you were never meant to live small, think small, or dream small. You were born for abundance, not the kind that corrupts, but the kind that confirms. The kind that doesn't just fill your pockets but funds your purpose. The kind that doesn't just change your status but shifts your assignment. You were created to be a river, not a drought. A fountain, not a desert. A testament to heaven's generosity, not earth's limitations. But the enemy knew this. He saw the blueprint of your destiny written in the stars before you ever opened your eyes. So he sent poverty to distract you from prosperity, lack to blind you to legacy, and struggle to silence the sound of your breakthrough. He knew that if you ever discovered who you really were, what you really carried, and what you were really capable of, his kingdom would tremble. So he made poverty feel normal. He made struggle feel spiritual. He made barely surviving feel like faith. And for a while, you bought the lie. You accepted the cage. You called the prison home. But you outgrew it. You see, there comes a moment in every chosen one's journey when the cage becomes too small for their calling, when the lie becomes too weak for their truth, when poverty becomes too poor to contain their prosperity. And that moment has arrived for you. You didn't escape poverty. You transcended it. You didn't break free from lack. You broke agreement with it. Because somewhere along the way, you realized that the God who owns cattle on 1,000 hills, who holds the silver and the gold, who commands the universe with a whisper, didn't create you to beg for what he already intended to give. The prison of poverty was built with thoughts, and thoughts can be changed. It was constructed with beliefs, and beliefs can be replaced. It was fortified with fear, and fear can be conquered. But it was never supposed to be permanent. It was only supposed to be your initiation into understanding what real wealth looks like. Real wealth isn't money, it's knowing who you are. Real prosperity isn't possessions. It's understanding your position. Real abundance isn't accumulation. It's alignment with the heart of God. And you, chosen one, have been aligned all along. You just couldn't see it from inside the cage. But the bars are melting now. The walls are crumbling. The door is swinging wide. Not because you finally earned your freedom, but because you finally remembered that you were never supposed to be locked up in the first place. You were never poor. You were in poverty. There's a difference. One is an identity. The other is just an experience. One is permanent. The other is temporary. One defines you. The other just delayed you. And the delay is over. The God who parted seas and multiplied loaves, who turned water into wine and dust into man, who spoke light into darkness and life into death, is the same God who has been orchestrating your escape from the very beginning. Every closed door was him protecting you from settling for less. Every no was him preserving you for yes. Every delay was him preparing you for deployment. You thought you were being punished. You were being positioned. You thought you were being forgotten. You were being favored. You thought you were being buried. You were being planted. And now it's harvest time. The wealth that's coming to you won't feel earned because it wasn't. It was assigned. It won't feel deserved because it isn't about deserving. It's about belonging. You don't belong in poverty. You never did. You belong in abundance. You always have. So step out of the cage, chosen one. Walk away from the lie. Turn your back on the limitation. The door is open. The path is clear. And poverty, the very thing that held you captive for so long, is about to become the testimony of how God turns prisons into palaces and captives into kings. Lack wasn't your identity. It was your initiation. Now get up. The prison is unlocked. They thought one stream would satisfy you. They were wrong. You see, chosen one, There's something the world doesn't understand about divine mathematics. When heaven decides to bless you, it doesn't follow earthly calculations. It doesn't add, it multiplies. It doesn't trickle, it floods. And what you're about to witness will defy every financial formula they ever taught you. You remember the drought, don't you? Those barren years when every well ran dry, when opportunity felt like a foreign language and provision seemed reserved for everyone but you. You watched others flourish while you rationed hope like precious water in the desert. But what you didn't know, what the enemy desperately tried to hide from you, was that God was underground, preparing rivers. Not one river, rivers, plural. Multiple streams of supernatural supply converging beneath the surface of your obedience. You didn't chase wealth, you carried it, and now it's multiplying because you moved. See, while you were faithful in the famine, heaven was engineering an explosion. While you tithed your last dollar, angels were redirecting tributaries. While you sowed in tears, the Almighty was calculating compound interest on your sacrifice. Every act of obedience wasn't just worship, it was hydro-engineering in the spirit realm. And now the dam is breaking. Watch what happens when one yes births 1,000 opportunities. When one door opens and reveals an entire hallway. When one check arrives and triggers an avalanche of provision you never saw coming. This isn't coincidence, chosen one. This is divine momentum. This is what happens when heaven's timing collides with your readiness. The river isn't just flowing now, it's multiplying, splitting, spreading, creating new channels you never dreamed possible. You know that business idea you buried in your journal? The one you labeled impossible because you lacked the capital? Heaven just approved the funding. You know that vision you whispered in prayer but never spoke aloud? Angels are assembling the team. You know that dream you thought died in the delay? It was never dead. It was incubating, and now it's hatching with supernatural speed. This is the mystery the wealthy tried to keep from you. Abundance isn't about accumulation, it's about circulation. It's not about holding tight, it's about releasing right. And you, in your season of scarcity, learned the secret they never did: how to let go with faith instead of gripping with fear. Now watch what that wisdom births. Streams are opening that you didn't even apply for. Contracts are being signed with your name on them while you sleep. Investors are being stirred in their spirit to seek you out. Not because of your resume, not because of your connections, but because the anointing on your life is calling to the resources heaven has already assigned to your assignment. This is acceleration beyond explanation. This is favor without justification. This is the moment when your faithfulness in the wilderness pays dividends in the promised land. But here's what will shock you most, chosen one. The multiplication isn't just financial, it's dimensional. Your influence is expanding. Your platform is broadening. Your voice is carrying further than it ever has before. People who never knew your name are being divinely directed to your door. Opportunities that once seemed light years away are suddenly landing in your lap with supernatural timing. Why? Because when God multiplies, He doesn't just multiply money, He multiplies everything. Your reach, your impact, your ability to bless others, your capacity to break generational cycles, your power to shift entire family trees from poverty to prosperity. You're not just receiving overflow, you're becoming overflow. The same mouth that once whispered, "I can't afford it," is about to declare, "How much do you need?" The same hands that once counted pennies are about to write checks that change lives. The same heart that once ached with lack is about to burst with the joy of being God's distribution center on earth. This is the river multiplication the enemy tried to dam up with delay. This is the overflow hell attempted to redirect with distraction. This is the flood of favor that was always yours, waiting for the appointed time, the perfect moment, the divine alignment of your obedience and heaven's release. And chosen one, that moment is now. Watch the streams converge. Feel the current strengthen. Hear the sound of rushing water in the spirit realm. What was once a trickle of hope is becoming a torrent of manifestation. What was once a drop of faith is becoming an ocean of fulfillment. The drought didn't break you, it prepared you for the deluge. You didn't survive the wilderness to barely make it in the promised land. You survived to thrive, to overflow, to become the answer to someone else's prayer for provision. to be heaven's proof that God still multiplies rivers where there was once only sand. So get ready, chosen one. Get your buckets ready, get your barns ready, get your heart ready, because what's coming isn't just enough to meet your needs. It's enough to exceed your wildest dreams and fund your deepest purpose. The river isn't just flowing, it's multiplying, and you're standing right in the center of the flood. They thought your silence meant surrender. They mistook your patience for powerlessness. But what they never understood was this: you weren't building a defense. You were building a dynasty. Tonight, chosen one, we're witnessing the greatest reversal in spiritual history. Not just your reversal, the reversal of every whispered insult, every dismissive glance, every door slammed in your face when you needed help the most. Because while they were measuring your worth by your wallet, heaven was measuring your character by your faithfulness, and the books are about to balance. You remember their faces, don't you? The ones who turned away when you asked for prayer about your finances, the relatives who rolled their eyes when you mentioned God's promises, the friends who suggested maybe you weren't believing hard enough when the bills kept coming and the breakthrough kept delaying. They watched you struggle with a mixture of pity and secret satisfaction, thinking your season of lack was evidence that God had somehow forgotten your address. But they never saw what was happening behind the veil. They never witnessed the late-night conversations between you and the Almighty, where your tears became liquid prayers and your desperation became sacred deposits in heaven's bank. They didn't hear when the Father whispered, "Not yet, but soon. Not here, but there. Not their way, but my way." You didn't fight fire with fire, you transcended the battlefield entirely. While they gossiped about your struggles, you grew stronger in secret. While they questioned your faith, you deepened your roots. While they offered worldly advice, you clung to eternal promises. You learned something they never could, that the opinions of man are vapor, but the approval of heaven is fortress. And fortresses, once built, are nearly impossible to tear down. The same mouth that said you'd never make it will soon say, "How did they do it?" The same voice that whispered you were cursed will ask, "What's their secret?" The same person who avoided your calls when you needed a loan will call you when they need a miracle. But here's the beautiful irony. Chosen one, by then, you won't need their validation. You'll have something far more precious: vindication from the throne. God doesn't raise you to flaunt you. He raises you to remind them this is what favor funds. Picture this moment, because it's closer than you think. You're standing in the same room where they once dismissed your dreams. But now, you're not asking for anything. You're offering everything. The checkbook in your hands isn't for personal luxury, it's for kingdom legacy. You're not there to show off your wealth. You're there to show them what wealth looks like when it's surrendered to divine purpose. That struggling single mother who once judged your faith, you're about to pay off her mortgage quietly, anonymously, through an attorney's letter. That pastor who said your season of financial drought was evidence of hidden sin, you're funding the expansion of his sanctuary, not because he deserves it, but because the people in those pews do. That family member who laughed when you tithed your last $20, you're about to hand them a check that covers their medical bills, and when they ask why, you'll simply say, "Because love multiplies when you give it away." This is the kind of reversal that makes heaven applaud and hell tremble. You see, they expected you to become bitter. They waited for you to turn cynical, to curse God and abandon faith like so many others who've walked through financial fire. They thought surely this would be the season you'd join their chorus of complaints about how God doesn't care about money, how prosperity is just a fairy tale for the gullible, how the righteous are destined to barely scrape by while the wicked prosper. But you never sang their song. Instead, you hummed heaven's melodivin when your voice cracked with exhaustion, even when the notes seemed impossible to reach, even when you could barely remember the words. And that melody, that stubborn, beautiful, unbreakable melody, reached the ears of the composer himself. Now watch what happens when heaven decides to conduct your symphony publicly. The vindication won't come as revenge, it will come as revelation. They won't see you gloating over your victory. They'll see you weeping over your assignment. They won't witness you hoarding your breakthrough. They'll watch you funding breakthroughs for others. The same hands that once trembled while counting change are now signing checks that change lives. The same voice that once whispered prayers of desperation is now declaring testimonies of divine intervention. And in that moment, that sacred, undeniable moment, they'll understand what you knew all along. This was never about you deserving wealth. This was about wealth deserving a worthy steward. This wasn't about God proving your faith to them. This was about God proving his faithfulness through you. The woman who was evicted will own property. The man who was denied credit will become the creditor. The family that survived on food stamps will fund food banks. The person who couldn't afford medicine will endow medical missions. This isn't just financial reversal, this is prophetic justice in action. They'll watch you move through their world like a walking miracle, but you'll move with the humility of someone who knows the source of every blessing. They'll see your success, but they'll also see your surrender. They'll witness your prosperity, but they'll also witness your praise. And in their confusion, they'll ask the question heaven has been waiting for them to ask. What kind of God does this for someone? And that, chosen one, is when your wealth becomes their witness. That's when your testimony becomes their invitation. That's when your breakthrough becomes their breakthrough, not because they deserve it, but because mercy multiplies when it's modeled. The tables aren't just turning, they're being rebuilt entirely. And this time, everyone has a seat. They thought you were collecting blessings. They had no idea you were becoming the blessing. You see, chosen one, there's something the enemy never calculated in his war against your finances. He spent decades trying to empty your pockets, drain your accounts, and convince you that poverty was your permanent address. But while he was focused on what was leaving your hands, he missed what was entering your heart. Every time you gave when you had nothing left to give, every time you tithed when the bills were screaming, every time you sowed through tears, you weren't just releasing seed, you were being transformed into soil. Sacred, consecrated, heaven-blessed soil where miracles don't just land, they multiply. You didn't just survive the financial wilderness, you became a financial weapon. The courts of heaven have been watching your transactions, chosen one, not just the deposits and withdrawals from your earthly accounts, but the invisible exchanges that matter most. They saw you give your last $20 to someone who needed it more. They recorded the moment you paid a stranger's grocery bill when your own refrigerator was empty. They documented every anonymous gift, every secret offering, every time you chose generosity over self-preservation. And now, heaven is making an announcement that will echo through eternity. This one is ready. This one can be trusted. This one has proven they understand the weight of stewardship. You are no longer a recipient of wealth. You are a walking treasury of heaven. Do you understand what that means? When you walk into a room now, you don't just carry money, you carry the authority to redistribute destiny. Your presence doesn't just shift atmospheres, it activates economies. You don't just write checks. You sign spiritual legislation that breaks generational curses and funds kingdom movements. The same hands that once trembled while counting coins are now authorized to deploy millions with the confidence of heaven's chief financial officer. They thought fear would break you. It backfired. It turned you into a fearless financier. You remember the nights when you couldn't sleep because the numbers didn't add up, don't you? When you stared at bills that seemed to multiply like locusts and whispered desperate prayers into the darkness. God, I don't understand. I've been faithful. I've been obedient. Why does money feel like my enemy? But what you didn't know was that every sleepless night was boot camp. Every financial pressure was preparing you to carry financial power. Every moment of lack was teaching you the language of abundancino, the shallow vocabulary of greed, but the deep grammar of grace. You weren't being punished by poverty. You were being prepared for prosperity. And now look at you. When financial storms hit others, you remain unmoved. Not because you're cold, but because you've learned to read the weather patterns of heaven. You know that every downturn is a setup for divine intervention. Every closed door in the natural realm means heaven is about to open a window in the supernatural. You've developed what economists can't measure and accountants can't audit, unshakable financial faith. You didn't learn to trust God for money. You learned that money exists to serve God through you. There's a reason why your story doesn't follow the typical rags to riches narrative, chosen one. Those stories are about personal transformation. Your story is about cosmic redistribution. You weren't lifted out of poverty so you could forget the poor. You were raised from financial death so you could resurrect others from economic exile. Every dollar that flows through your hands now carries a divine assignment. Every investment you make is a prophetic act. Every business decision you authorize is a spiritual decree. You are not just rich, you are righteously responsible for riches. The angels assigned to your finances aren't just accountants, they're architects of justice. They're building something through your obedience that will outlast your lifetime. When you fund that single mother's education, you're not just changing her future, you're launching a lineage of leaders. When you anonymously pay off someone's medical debt, you're not just relieving their burden, you're removing a stronghold that was blocking their breakthrough. When you invest in that young entrepreneur's vision, you're not just supporting a business, you're bankrolling a revival. You were never chasing riches, you were becoming a vault. But here's what will astound you most, chosen one. The wealth that flows through you now operates by completely different laws than the money you once struggled to obtain. This abundance doesn't diminish when you share it, it expands. This prosperity doesn't create anxiety, it produces peace. This financial favor doesn't separate you from people, it draws the right souls into your orbit. Because this isn't money blessed by God, this is God using money to demonstrate His nature through your nature. Your bank account has become a scroll. Every transaction tells a story of divine faithfulness. And the most beautiful part, you don't have to announce your assignments. You don't need to publicize your generosity. You don't require applause for your obedience. You move in holy stealth, dispensing hope through direct deposits, funding miracles through money transfers, answering prayers through anonymous gifts. You've become heaven's secret agent of financial warfare, dismantling poverty one blessing at a time, destroying debt one payment at a time, defeating despair one gift at a time. You don't just get rich, you become a mobile ecosystem of divine provision. The world sees your wealth and assumes you got lucky. Your family celebrates your success and credits your hard work. Your friends admire your prosperity and wonder about your strategy. But you know the truth that makes you smile in sacred silence. This was never about you accumulating treasure on earth. This was always about you becoming a treasure that heaven could trust with infinite resources. You're not a millionaire with a mission. You're a missionary with millions. You're not a business owner who happens to believe in God. You're God's business, operating in human form. Now walk like the bank of heaven carries your name. Because it does, chosen one. Every step you take is backed by divine collateral. Every word you speak is underwritten by eternal equity. Every prayer you whisper is processed through heaven's unlimited account. You are no longer asking God for provision, you are provision, walking in the authority of the one who owns cattle on 1,000 hills, who holds the wealth of nations in his hands, who chose you not because you were qualified, but because he knew you could be trusted with the kind of riches that transform realms. You didn't survive to tell your story. You survived to become the story, the living proof that when heaven decides to fund a life, poverty becomes powerless, lack becomes laughable, and limitation becomes a lie that no longer has permission to speak. Walk worthy of the treasury you've become. You are not just blessed, you are sent. My dear friend, if you've stayed with me through this entire journey tonight, something sacred has happened in your spirit. You didn't just watch a video, you received a divine download. You didn't just hear words, you encountered a revelation that hell tried to keep hidden from you for decades. Let me remind you of the most important truths we've uncovered together. You are not an accident in God's economy. Your financial struggles were not punishments, they were preparations. Every closed door, every delayed blessing, every season of scarcity was heaven's way of developing your character to match your calling. You are not just destined for wealth, you are designed to be a walking treasury of heaven, a mobile ecosystem of divine provision. Remember this, God's method of making you rich will shock you because it won't follow the world's blueprint. It will come through supernatural channels, divine connections, and heavenly strategies that bypass every earthly limitation. Your breakthrough is not dependent on the economy, the stock market, or any human system. It's anchored in covenant promises that were signed before the foundation of the world. But here's what I want you to know with absolute certainty tonight: you are not walking this path alone. Even in your darkest financial moments, when the bills piled up like mountains and hope felt like a foreign language, God was there. He was orchestrating, aligning, and preparing. And right now, there are thousands of other chosen ones watching this message who have walked where you've walked, cried the tears you've cried, and whispered the prayers you've whispered. We are a community bound not by geography, but by grace, not by circumstances, but by calling. Let me ask you something that will settle deep in your heart tonight. If God trusted you with the wilderness, don't you think He trusts you with the wealth? If He kept you through the valley, won't He establish you on the mountaintop? Now, I want to pray over your life with the authority that heaven has given me, and I want you to receive every word as if I'm standing right there with you, my hand on your shoulder, speaking life into your situation. Father God, I lift up every precious soul who has heard this word tonight. You know their names. You know their struggles. You know the silent tears they've shed when no one was watching. Lord, I speak over their finances right now. Let chains of poverty be broken. Let cycles of lack be shattered. Let generational curses of insufficiency be canceled by the blood of Jesus. God, I declare that supernatural provision is released into their lives this very moment. Open doors that no man can shut. Connect them with divine favor that bypasses natural systems. Let their obedience in secret be rewarded in public. Let their faithfulness in small things qualify them for much. Touch their hearts, Lord, and remove every ounce of shame they've carried about money. Replace fear with faith, anxiety with expectancy, doubt with divine confidence. Let them walk in the authority of sons and daughters, knowing they are heirs to your unlimited resources. I pray that you surround them with the right people, the right opportunities, and the right wisdom to steward what you're about to release. Let their increase bring glory to your name and healing to hurting hearts around them. Father, give them peace tonight, the kind of peace that doesn't depend on bank balances, but rests in your promises. Let them sleep with supernatural rest, knowing that while they rest, you are working on their behalf. In Jesus' mighty name, let it be so. Amen. My friend, if this message has touched your heart, I want you to do something powerful right now. In the comments below, simply type, "I receive," and watch how God honors your declaration of faith. Share your testimony, ask your questions, let us know how we can pray for you. This community believes in the power of agreement, and when we stand together in faith, mountains move. And please, don't keep this revelation to yourself. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their financial struggles are not their final destination. Help us reach other chosen ones who are still believing for their breakthrough. Your share could be the very thing that changes someone's life forever. If you're new to this community of believers, welcome home. Hit that subscribe button and join thousands of others who refuse to accept defeat as permanent. Together, we're not just changing bank accounts, we're transforming bloodlines. Thank you for trusting me with your time, your attention, and your faith tonight. Thank you for believing that God still speaks, still provides, and still performs miracles for those who dare to believe. You are seen, you are loved, you are chosen, and your wealthy season starts now. God bless you abundantly.